Good evening. Something amiss, huh? Well, I'm sitting here quietly because I have no idea what I'm doing is working. So, assuming that what I'm doing is working, then I can proceed. But this is all digitally challenging for me. In case anybody's listening, let me explain. I don't really know how to do some of this media. Podcasting. I've been doing it the same way every night, setting it up manually, doing it manually. So tonight, I set it up as an event, and I have no idea if it's working because nobody seems to be here. So, in the absence of people being present, I'm assuming that there's something wrong. So what can you do? All right. So, looks like I screwed this up. If you're on YouTube, give me a moment. If you're on Facebook, you have no idea what I'm doing, do you? And that's okay. Amazing. Yep, I seem to be going alone here. All right, let's try this a different way. I have completely screwed this up. Amazing. Amazing. Every time I try to do something different, I screw up everything. So, if there's anybody who can hear anything, you should comment because I've screwed this up. So, hi, Chris. All right, one person got this. I don't know what happened to everybody else. I've been 3 minutes and 29 seconds on YouTube to no avail. And on Facebook, I suddenly have people, but I had to shut down what I was doing. Huh. Anyways, it's beyond me. What I did, what I didn't do. I see you on YouTube. Well, thank you, Curtis. If you're still there, thank you. That's helpful. All right. I can't comment on YouTube. I don't know why. You should be able to. It's set up so you would be able to comment on YouTube. Let's see. Excuse me, everybody. I'm trying to work out the bugs here. I've promoted this on two different forums, and I'm getting some feedback that I'm screwing this up. You're back. What'd you miss? Well, do your homework. You'll have to call the other kids, Joan, and ask them what you missed. If you're on YouTube, I'm also talking to people on Facebook. This is simultaneous podcast. So, yeah, see, Becky's explained that I'm not communicating in the way that I thought I'd set it up. So I'm just going to move forward and hope that Curtis, who's was on YouTube can hear me and will be able to communicate. And if he can't communicate, he can always check in on Facebook, I think. I don't know. I'm really, I don't get it, man. Y'all know that I am challenged when it comes to matters of digitalness, right? So, all right. Tonight is a special night. Tonight is a special night. Unspecialized by the fact that I create an event that is not operational. So people who are waiting for the event may be lost in the abyss, and I apologize if that happened. I can't direct them now because I don't know how. Okay? So I'm doing the best I can to navigate 5x5 video and audio. I don't know what that means. I don't know, Curtis, what that means. I need lessons in digital communication, in specifically how to do YouTube and how to do Facebook podcast in a way that is operational and accessible. In the meantime, let's just rock and roll. So I had music and everything set up on Facebook. That got shot to shit. We're done with that. We moved on. We started a new podcast at about 6:03. YouTube had what would have been my stuff. And it looked like what I'm about to put here, just so you all can have it. I'm going to post it in Facebook as well. So now everybody should be somehow on the same page, but doubtful. So I've been saying for the last couple of days that I thought one of the discussions that would be really good to have is, who am I? Who are we? Who are you? And I mean that real sincerely. I don't mean that facetiously. It's not meant to be comical. So let me lay the foundation. In 2008, after having suffered some significant personal setbacks, that's maybe that's the wrong place to start. Before 2008, I suffered numerous personal setbacks because I was either using or abusing chemicals, and I was not, I wasn't doing a good job of doing anything except raising kids. I had 2 daughters, and I may not have been great, but I was good at it. Right, that's the question, Mark. So I got sober in 2007, and that was healthy. And I was not a meditator. And I joined this AA group at 6:45 a.m. in Tucson, Arizona, because I lived there. And they wanted to meditate for 5 minutes every morning. And I was there every morning. I couldn't do it. What I would do is I would read something, look at my phone, whatever, while they meditate. Then we would have a meeting, and that I participated in. So shortly after I got sober, I decided to buy a business. Complete flop. Utter and complete flop. Hundreds of thousands of dollars were involved. Total flop. So my financial well-being was damaged, and I'd already been struggling with my spiritual well-being, my physical well-being. Drugs and alcohol made me see a doctor far more often than I wished to. Hi, Kathy. So I got my resources together, my psychological resources together, and I tried to pursue a path of wellness. A good portion of it was in 12 steps, but I needed more, and I found it in Buddhist practices. I met a monk. We started meditating. Most of you know this part of the story. So I'm meditating, and I'm going to ask you to meditate in short order, but we're not there yet. I'm meditating, and I'm discovering that there's this whole, I don't know whether you call it world, there's this whole recognition that begins to take place in meditation about who I am. And I have traveled that road now for 11 years, constantly aware of the following, that for the first 55 years of my life, I would think a thought, I would own it, embrace it, good, bad, or indifferent. It didn't matter. It was my thought, right? And when you get to Buddhism, they talk a lot about no self. And I've never understood no self. I still don't understand it, but I have an inkling of what is trying to be conveyed. And I want to share that with you. Okay. Now, to do that, I think that it would be prudent if you spend even 3 minutes following my instructions on meditation, followed by my explanation of where I'm trying to take you. So if you're able to hear me now, whether on YouTube or Facebook, doesn't matter. You can simply just humor me. Of course, I can't see you, so if you don't humor me, I'm still humored, right? But what I do is I just kind of sit upright and I close my eyes and I take a deep breath. You may not be where it's quiet, but that's okay. Doesn't matter. Just close your eyes for a short period of time. Breathe naturally. Bring your full awareness to the breath. Breathing in, just be fully focused that you're breathing in. When you breathe out, be fully focused that you're breathing out. And no matter what else arises, sound, sensation, or thought, just do what you can to stay with the breath, because the breath is this moment, and that's critical to what I want to share and explore with you in a few moments. So see if you can just spend like 2 minutes trying to stay with the breath and being an observer of anything else that arises. Don't grasp, don't engage. Whatever thoughts, sounds, or sensations percolate, just glance at them, come back to the breath. Breathing in, just be aware that you're breathing in. Breathing out, just be aware that you're breathing out. And then opening your eyes, and let me continue. So the reason I asked you to do that is to see if you can, in some way, shape, or form, replicate what happens to me when I'm meditating for moments or for longer. And so, as I was sitting here trying to focus on the breath, something we call thinking occurred. You may have had a thought. Your thought may have been, where's Ken going with this? How long will Ken want us to do this? Is that the dog barking in the other room? And so what I began to ask myself is, where did that thought come from? But even more important to me is, where did that thought go when I stopped thinking it? Because what I began to realize through meditation is that my thoughts have no form. They're formless. They arise from some place I know not, and they evaporate into a place I know not. So I began to realize what they were trying to tell me is that I'm not the master of my thoughts or emotions. I have no control, for the most part, of my thoughts, emotions, right? Another thing I don't have a lot of control over, I can do what I can to stay healthy. Most of you know I'm an avid bike rider. Before that, I was an avid hiker. I've always been very active, but here's the thing. I'm 68 years old. I was born December 4, 1952. And as I always say to people, I will never be younger than I am today. Nothing I do will ever make me younger. This is the youngest I will ever be, right? I have no control over this process. I can try to keep this body fit, but all of you know somebody who embarked to be fit. They were a runner, swimmer, biker, weightlifter, whatever. And then one day you heard they had a heart attack or stroke or whatever. They got cancer, and they died, or they're disabled. And clearly, they didn't have any input into that process. We don't know if that's all about genes, is it about lifestyle? What is it about? But that's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. What it clearly is about is that we collectively don't control this thing that we call aging. We don't control this thing we call thinking. You can do some stuff with thinking, but for the most part, same thing with emotions. So anybody who's listening to me now, for instance, if you ever broke up with somebody you really cared about, you probably had your feelings hurt. And a day or two into your having your feelings hurt, you thought to yourself, I don't like the way I feel. I don't want to feel this way. But you found that you weren't in charge of how you felt. So who are you? Because the you that I could talk to at any time, person to person, probably tries to exercise control over thought, sensation, speech, all of it. That's the inclination. And the Buddha recognized that our inclination was to control, and that this, he didn't use the word control. The Buddha used the word grasping. So we grasp, he would say, at these things. And when you grasp, you have the illusion of control. But what you're really creating is the environment for suffering, because whatever you're grasping is going to fade. Whether it's an emotion, whether it's happiness, whether it's sadness. In fact, then he went on to say that while things may be unpleasant or sad, if you have an aversion to these things, that's no different than grasping things like pleasure and comfort. So I have been on this journey for years. I realized that the first 55 years of my life, when I had input into what I was going to do, I tended to live fast and large. It was like the whole thing was a novel that I would get to read later on. And wouldn't it be interesting if you jumped out of this airplane? and I never jumped out of an airplane. Wouldn't it be interesting if I owned a topless club, right? Wouldn't that be, economically advantageous? Wouldn't it be kind of fun to hang out with people in a bar all the time and you own the bar and everybody kisses your ass? And I had all this stuff that caused me to make decisions like buying a bar, buying 2 bars, buying 3 bars. And thinking that this was a plan to ultimately become philanthropic. Okay. And what it did was it just pushed me deeper. Obviously, it was not the direction I wanted to go. I didn't want to go to my bottom. I wanted these things I was doing and buying the business in Tucson, whatever it was. The plan was to elevate me somehow, to give me more money, more satisfaction. And I see everybody that I have time to spend with and talk to has these illusions. So what happened was I was meditating when I was a monk, mostly because that's when I did a lot of meditating. And I had this epiphany that this mind I had no control over it. I would think up thoughts that were just ridiculous, that I would never wish to think, but I thought them anyways. And I'm like, well, where did that come from? Why am I thinking about petting dolphins in Iowa? Why am I having some argument with a human being that's just out of sight? It was like dreaming. When I would meditate, it'd be like dreaming sometimes. I suddenly find a constriction in my chest. I'm angry. I'm angry at that person. I can't quite make out who that person is because it was like a dream state. But I knew that I was physically reacting to a conversation that wasn't taking place, but my body was experiencing it. And I knew in that moment, I'm not myself. I am a conglomeration of things, but I am mistaken when I think those things are me. So, where am I? This is my hand. It's attached to my arm. My arm's attached to my shoulder, neck, blah, blah, blah. But this hand is not me. People lose their hand and still function. They still think, they do things. So I could lose my hand. I would still be Ken, what you call Ken, right? And by the way, Eckhart Tolle, who's a very good teacher, he points out that when you call something a name, Ken, tree, lamp, you are limiting it because now it's just that thing that you named. He tries to kind of suggest that we have constricted our world with labels that probably would have been best avoided. I don't know if that's true. I still think it's an interesting theory to put forth. So if I'm not creating the thought, in other words, if when I'm having, I'll give you another example. So I loan somebody some money and they don't pay me back when they're supposed to. And they don't pay me back a week later after that. They don't pay me a month back. They don't pay me back for months. And one day I'm sitting there thinking, when I see them, I'm going to tell them. And, if they say to me, then I'm going to say, and I craft this conversation. The reality being that most of the time, that conversation never takes place except in my head. If I ever do see the person, I may start out the conversation the way I planned it, but I always had to tell the juries in my trials, please expect very little of me, because I grew up watching people's lives that were scripted. Like all of you, TV, television, and movies have been a part of my life. And so I saw people behave in certain ways. In some of those ways, I thought, that's cool. I want to be like that guy. I want to be like the Fonz. I want to be like Clint Eastwood. I want to be like James Dean. I want to be like Steve McQueen. And then there were people that I didn't like. Characters on the screen I despised, who, by the way, didn't even exist, right? They were just a scripted person. I mean, Gary Oldman, who's English and plays Americans all the time, plays the despicable human beings. And if I'm in a movie theater and it's dark, I get agitated at some of the things he does and says because I'm taking them in as though they're real. Even though I know I'm in a movie and yada, 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 my emotions can be manipulated by somebody who's got a script and people who have staged these events. Well, when I get to trial, I am incapable of staging pretty much anything. I can plan to call a witness and I can think to myself, when I get this witness on the stand and they tell the jury that they're a doctor and they reviewed these records and these records are not accurate and that he's an expert and here's why, this will be a pivotal moment. And I can imagine, but it never, ever, ever, ever unfolds the way I think. I have asked juries after a trial, both wins and losses, how they perceived an event that I had a very concrete picture of what had happened. So the one that stuck out in my mind the most was I did this murder trial before a jury in Chicago, and this kid had signed a confession, and he was supposed to go down. He was supposed to get convicted, supposed to spend almost the rest of his life in prison. He was a young man. And I fought like hell. But here's the thing. This judge didn't care for me at all. An Italian guy in Chicago. And he cautioned me because I came in the trial late. I mean, I came to the case late, not the trial. And he cautioned me. He said, if you lose, I'm going to penalize that kid dramatically because he's alleged to have killed one and wounded 5. And I'm not playing. And I'm like, I get it. No, but the kid didn't do it. So we're going to go to trial. The judge was consistently denying me my objections. Objection, the other side denied. The other side would object, Mr. Goldberg, and he would say, yes, I agree. So I talked to the judge. I called him in the chambers and said, I think you're prejudiced. He denied it. Doesn't matter. I saw the jury at the end of the trial. We won. I said, one of the questions I asked is, what did you think of the judge picking on me? Now, I was really nervous through the trial, the way the judge treated me. They said, we just thought the judge was trying to protect the prosecutors because you were beating up on them so badly. That thought wasn't even in the top 100 of thoughts I might have come up with for what was going on in the courtroom and how it was being perceived. So for me to marry my perceptions, for me to grasp at my notions of who I am, who you are, what anything is, typically, more often than not, results in a, yeah, you're wrong. And so then I embark on this journey where I'm being told there is no self. And I'm like, I don't know that I'm down with that. Who's this person? Well, like I said, I'm not my hand, I'm not my ear, I'm not my nose. You all know that. You all know that you're not any of those things. But you've been told, if you're Christian or Jewish or Muslim, you've probably been told you have a soul. And you may have a soul, The point I'm about to make is, where's your soul? People like to point here, but if you put a fluoroscope or an MRI or anything, there's nothing there but organs and blood vessels. There is nowhere that science, and the science is trying to identify some place that you could call a soul. This thing that they say when you die, people say, oh, there was a whoosh, and I felt their soul leave their body. You may have, but you didn't know where that soul was. So is that truly somebody's essence? Is our essence a soul? Is it the synapses that we call the brain, that we call thinking? And if you are in charge of your thoughts, then henceforth, starting today, June 5th, 2021, 6:31 p.m., do not have any more sad or negative thoughts unless you choose to. Only think happy, calm, peaceful thoughts, because if you're in charge, that would be desirable, wouldn't it? And you can't do it. Nobody can do it. Nobody. Now, maybe there are people who have been meditating and practicing. It could be Catholic monks, could be Buddhist monks, whatever. And maybe they are enlightened. And maybe they really can detach from this thing we call thinking or this thing we call feeling. Maybe they really can always be an observer rather than it. There are the observer. They're sitting back. They're up in the stands and they're watching the thoughts. When I teach meditation, I tell people, if you have a persistent thought, so here, I give the instruction to sit and focus on the breath for 30 minutes. The reason to focus on the breath is the breath anchors us to the present moment. And in the present moment, everything's typically fine, right? If we're not carrying the pain of the past into this moment or anxiety of the future, this moment's generally okay. So the instruction is to stay with the breath. Always come back to the breath. Do not get caught up in thought. Everybody does. Everybody comes to me and says, I got dragged into the future. I got dragged into the past. It was all I could do to get back to the breath, of course. But I say, if you have a persistent thought, so you struggled with a thought, but you got past it, you're back to the breath, and your mind has moved along. But sometimes you have something, grief, affection. There are a variety of thoughts and emotions that may just persist through a period of meditation. And I say, well, in that case, hold it up to the light like a diamond. Just hold it up to the bright light like you see a jeweler do. Look for the flaws in this diamond, the flaws being your own participation. How does this diamond come to be? What are the flaws and what's your part in it? And when people do that, they often find themselves disentangling from something that was troublesome that need not be. I am the source of my problems. Even when I have a physical malady that causes me pain, discomfort, sickness, whatever it is, a good portion of the suffering I will do will be my mental attitude about it. It's not going to be necessarily the illness. A lot of times it's my reaction to the illness. So the last several years, when I have gotten sick, I don't do this the whole time, but at some point I will go, well, you're making this harder on yourself by sitting here being agitated. You have a fever. The fever is not going to pay attention to you. You can rail against the fever. You can rail against the headache. You can rail against the congestion, but it ain't going to stop because it needs to work its way out. And when I reach this place of acceptance, then I'm okay. But the Ken that tries to control the universe will fill up with medication. I still will anyways. And will try to control what the experience is. But what I've learned through this meditation practice is I'm not who I think I am. But I do have physical, emotional, spiritual, psychological manifestations and perceptions, and I own them. I mean, there has to be a self. You know, when people say there's no self in Buddhism, people think, well, who am I? How can I be no self? Well, I've said it's a troublesome thought. It's a troublesome concept. So what I realize is, yes, there is a me. There's a me that went to O'Keefe Grade School and completed 8th grade and graduated. There's a me that then went on to South Shore High School and then to boarding school and on and on and on. There's a me that's been in a lot of fights. There's me that's had a lot of money and lost a lot of money. But that me was oftentimes a human being that was out of control versus a human being that, as they say in AA, could pause when agitated or doubtful. I didn't bother pausing because once I had a feeling or a sensation or a thought, since it was mine, I just executed whatever plan I had, whether it was sugar in your gas tank, slapping you up the side of your head, or giving you a hug because I was embracing my affection for it. Didn't matter. Now, I may still hug, I may still slap, but usually it's after I've paused. And I didn't know I could pause. I didn't know that I wasn't everything that just percolated to the surface. I thought I owned it. And if I owned it, which also meant that I had to be right when I told you something because I was invested in this thought. It's my thought. Why would I wouldn't tell you something that's wrong on purpose. I have a lot of integrity. I would never lie to a friend on purpose. So, and then I got to Buddhism, and they taught me the 5 precepts. What's that got to do with self? So the 5 precepts are: take no life, refrain from the taking of any life, refrain from stealing or taking that which is not freely given, refrain from lying or gossiping, refrain from sexual misconduct, and refrain from intoxicating substances. So what I found was, here I thought I was a really ethical guy. But once I took these vows in Buddhism in front of a monk and started monitoring my behavior, what I found was that sometimes I bend the rules a little bit. I don't now, or I haven't lately. But back in the day, I would bend the rules because I had a good reason. I would lie to you because you didn't need the truth, because the truth would hurt you. I would pick up something somebody left, look around, nobody's there, must be mine. I didn't see it, but I realize now that in some regards, the unchallenged mind is insane. It's a mechanism that is out of control and needs to be reined in. I need to meditate. I need to be able to become a keen observer of this thing and recognize what part I have in all of it and be able to step back from it and go, well, that's just crazy. You know, there's a saying, they don't lock you up for thinking crazy, they lock you up for acting crazy. Well, guess what? You usually think crazy before you act crazy. So I'm not really a proponent of that thing. I will grant you it's better to only think crazy than act crazy. But the reality is, thinking crazy is preliminary to acting crazy. And I have crazy thoughts, But now when I see them, I'm like, yeah, don't go down that dark alley. They also have a saying, and somebody said in AA, if you go up in my mind, you better bring a flashlight and a gun because it's a dangerous neighborhood. I understand that. My mind is a busy, disturbing place, and when unchecked, will frequently make decisions which will cause Ken, this thing, suffering. Why would I take actions that cause suffering? Somebody pisses me off. They've moved on. Hours later, I'm still pissed off. I'm still stewing in it. What are my options? Well, if I believe that my feelings are valid and they're mine and I embrace them, then I may find myself stuck in this anger, which, by the way, is futile because the other person's not there anymore. Or I might focus on letting go. Don't grasp at my anger. Look at my anger, hold it up to the light and go, well, you know why he owes me money? Because I loaned him money. It's the people that I'm talking about that don't pay me money, they didn't steal, they didn't sneak in my house and go through my billfold and take my money. These are people who asked me for money, and like an idiot, I said, yeah. So I divorced myself from my self-righteousness, from my righteous indignation, and realized that that's just this thing that I've created. I was writing the great American novel. I would do drugs and alcohol like a crazy man. I would get into fights with people I shouldn't fight with, not because they didn't deserve it, but because they were big or they were mean or whatever. And I was going to show that I'm the meanest. I'm not the biggest. I've never been the biggest in any room, but I'm the meanest guy here. You should fear me. So when I came up with a plan early in life that I needed to be feared in order to be safe, I created this persona that sort of exists, but not really. I was never as bad as I acted. I was never as tough as I acted. I just went for the gusto. Okay. And it worked. So it kind of became this, how do you say? I began to entrench this type of behavior in the way I reacted to the world because it seemed to be successful. So my mind is like, well, that worked, right? And I didn't explore, well, what else might have worked? Or what might be a better option? Because maybe having everybody afraid of you and not wanting to be close to you isn't what you really desire. So I just challenge everybody who can hear this podcast to try to examine yourself from the perspective of who are you? Are you your thoughts? Are you your feelings? Are you this physical sensation? I mean, we know, and I'm going to finish in a moment, we know that people lay in bed immobilized with disease or an accident, but we know that their brain, in many cases, they're still thinking. We also know that in some cases, like with my dad, when my dad went into a coma 25 years ago, his body was just worn out from cancer. He was fine one minute, next minute he was in a coma. The doctors ran a series of tests and came back to us the next day and said, here's what we see. We put an EKG, I think it is, on his head. We thought that we would find nothing. In other words, we thought he was brain dead because he's in this coma, but we ran these tests and we apologize. There is brain activity. So we needed you to know that before you decide what to do, because you, Mrs. G, will have the ability, the authority to tell us to pull the plug on your husband. Now, she would have been comforted, in a sense, to find out that my dad didn't have any brain activity, so she would feel she was doing the best thing. she and her children, of which I was one, were troubled by this. And the doctor went on to say that, yes, he was troubled. So what he had done was he consulted with some neuro experts. They looked at the chart that was created by this, and they decided the odds were that what they were seeing my dad was nothing but electrical snow. And he used the example of a television that went off at midnight back in the day, and you would look, and there would just be snow on the screen. They were just random electrical impulses. They did not represent a movie, a TV show, or anything. It was just electrical activity. And he said, we don't think they're thoughts. We think they're just electrical activity that he's having. And my mom decided that given the state of his body, that he was no longer had any bone marrow because the cancer had eaten it, to just let him go. And she did. And we were all behind her. But so you can segregate the body. I mean, there are times when they do exactly what they did with my dad and come back and say, well, there seem to be patterns of thought. We don't know what to tell you. Apparently, the brain is active. I've also been with people where the body was breathing and doing things, but the doctor said, this person's way past being aware. They're in a coma, a persistent vegetative state. So my final point is, ask yourself, who are you? There's value in asking this because we are impermanent. But who is we? And if we is this concrete thing called Ken, and then I start thinking, well, what happens if there's no Ken? I'm screwed. My me will be gone. It'll disappear. What happens? Well, if it ain't me, then I don't really have to worry. It's just going to run its course. And then maybe it'll run another course later on as rebirth. Maybe it won't do anything. Maybe just be energy, because all energy doesn't die. It just transfers, it transmutes, it transforms. It takes the sting out of some of what your anxiety is. And as I said earlier in the week, anxiety about death leads to religion. So it's not a knock on religion. I'm just saying, my perception is most religions originate out of people wanting an explanation of mortality and wanting someplace to go. So I used my 45 minutes by going 48, but I lost 3 minutes in the beginning. I apologize if you were on YouTube, because you should have been able to communicate, but one individual said they were not being able to comment, and I apologize. Chris has been commenting. I haven't been reading it out loud, but I've been watching, and he's had some opinions aligned with the conversation. All of you people on Facebook have been able to read his comments. So let us do metta before we depart from each other. Have a good weekend after that. And I bring my hands together before my heart. I close my eyes, I bow my head. I take a deep breath. And I think to myself, and I would ask you to think to yourselves, may I be happy, healthy, free from harm, free from anger, anxiety, fear. May this practice of loving kindness bring about a life of greater peace and comfort. May my mother and father, wherever they are, and then all my living relatives and all my friends, be happy, healthy, and free from harm. May they also pursue a path that brings them greater peace and comfort in their lives. And to those persons who are troublesome to me, for whatever reason I harbor some resentment or ill will, I give that up for the moment, just for this moment, so I may send them goodwill, that they may be happy, healthy, free from harm. May they also be enjoying their lives in this moment. And to all living beings throughout the entire universe, humans and non-humans, may they be the recipients of our collective goodwill, compassion, and kindness, so that all living beings should be happy, healthy, free from harm. May they all be safe, comfortable, and at peace. Satu, Satu, Satu. Oh, thank you, Joan. Thank you for that feedback. Thank you for the heart, Becky, and for saying this was thought-provoking. Thank you, Mark and Ann. And Kathy, if she stuck around, I hope she did. Both Kathys, actually. So like I say, Chris, Becky, everybody. Curtis, well, you're welcome, Curtis. I thought you couldn't comment, but you just did. I saw it. I saw YouTube. I had my first comment on YouTube. All right, guys. I really tried to have some idea what I was talking about tonight, in contrast to most nights. So if you're a first-time listener to my podcast, this is not usual. Usually this hour, this 45 minutes is more like a Ken Goldberg variety act, playing the congas, a spontaneous combustion, whatever. But tonight, I tried to stay focused, and I appreciate those of you that tune in. Share it with a friend if you think it'll be helpful. Satu means excellent or well done. Satu. Namaste.